Rick was nice enough to hang on through the entire news break, so I'm going right to him. Thanks for that. Rick, what you got for me?
Yeah. Hey, Glenn. Thanks for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
So, Glenn, I'm a Wyoming State Trooper. Happens to be my day off, and I was listening to your program while I was running errands here this morning.
Okay.
I heard the comments about 80s should be open all the time, and it's politically based why it gets closed and things like that. Different rationale that people believe, and I just called in really to kind of just lend my experience of working I'm based out of Laramie.
Okay.
And so I've worked for the last 13 plus years this Laramie area, which is basically covers all of Albany County, but I also cross borders over towards the Arlington Elk Mountain side and also towards Cheyenne when we need to, and weather events and other things. But I wanted to assure people that the actual reason when we close roads, and I've closed them plenty of times personally, is solely based on when the roads become so dangerous that we know that we are going to have a lot of serious crashes and potentially loss of life out there. And it isn't based on the Trucking Association or any of those factors. Actually, it's just based on the need to close the road at the right time. And usually, candidly, if anything, we probably have a tendency to be a little behind the eight ball to get the roads closed down as the crashes start to develop. But a good example is just this last weekend. We've got the big Cowboy game, on Saturday. I was working that day, and we had some really bad fog rolled in. In fact, it was so bad, I had a trooper running with all his lights on. I was too. He was average 60 to 100 feet in front of me, and I couldn't see his lights. And our lights are like real high-intensity things. I mean, far beyond people's headlights and so forth. And so what we had people that were running at all kinds of speeds in that fog, anywhere from, say, 10 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour, and yet they couldn't see any more than 60 feet on average. And we started having pile-ups and stuff, and we closed the roads as fast as we possibly could. And despite the fact that we got the roads closed on either side of some of the worst area, which was between milepost 340 and 333, which was where most of our crashes were. So you have the people that were already between those gates, okay? And it was it's scary for us and for the people out there when you talk to whether it was some of the truck drivers or some of the cars that were involved in these crashes, you'd ask them, well, you had people that just flat stopped in the middle of the road and were stopped behind other people who had wrecked.
Wow.
And so I'd ask these truck drivers and these other people driving passenger cars, I said, so tell me, how fast were you going before you wrecked?
Right.
And it blew my mind. On average, they were telling me 40 to 60 miles an hour. You can't stop a car or a semi-truck in that length of time. So I want to assure everybody that one thing about WYDOT and the Wyoming Highway Patrol is we're extremely conscientious about keeping these roads open as much as we possibly can. And the decisions are often based on individuals, whether it's troopers or WYDOT supervisors or plow drivers, for instance. When we see something that's going to eminently close the road, if we're able to be ahead of the curve before the crashes start, and we can shut that down, we find that if we shut it down momentarily, and let's just take it's like a snowstorm, and what typically happens around here is the semi-trucks can't get up the hill going up the summit, towards Cheyenne. And so what happens is they start jackknifing until they plug the whole thing. Well, once that happens, it takes hours upon hours to try and untangle that, then try and get the plow trucks to get the road sand and whatnot to try and get it open. And meanwhile, when that happens, what's interesting is because there's so much concerted effort and all of our resources are tied up trying to untangle that, then the westbound lanes typically go to heck, and then they start wrecking there and plug that up, and then consequently you actually end up in sometimes more like a day's delay, whereas sometimes when you can catch it quick enough, you can close the road temporarily, take care of the problem, and reopen it. So we do all kinds of things in order to get things going, Glenn. But the other thing I want people to know too, which is I think is kudos to the troopers and the whiteout people. When we have a crash on any of our roads, barring really, really severe circumstances, we do everything we possibly can to clear that crash out of there as quickly as possible, and we do everything we can to keep moving traffic around that crash. And we come up with a whole variety of ways to do that, case specific. But and I think they do a fine job in Colorado, so I'm not knocking them. But I've also been one who has gone many times down I-25 towards Denver, and of course there's a horrendous volume of traffic they're dealing with. But it's interesting how many times they have what appears to be kind of a minimal crash, if you will, and traffic is backed up on that interstate for miles upon miles, and they have different ways of doing things, and I think they're doing what they can, but again, they just have so much traffic to deal with. So you really get stymied in those lanes here. But here in Wyoming, actually, we have a great emphasis on clearing these roads as quickly as possible. We have a great emphasis on opening them. But I think people would be amazed, when they talk about, I can always get through on the interstate. Well, maybe you can if you've got a great big four-wheel drive jacked clear up off the ground and you got tire chains to throw all the way around and so forth under some of the worst conditions that I've seen. But I'm telling you, unfortunately, the bulk of the people can't.
Yeah, well, and I think, Rick, a lot of people worry more about what is an inconvenience to them than to see what you're going through or the people involved in the tangle-up is going through. Really, most people that when I'm riding with somebody start to grumble about how they are inconvenienced, not taking a look at the situation in front of them. But I got to run because of time. I am so glad you hung through that break. That was an incredible call. And thanks, by the way, for what you do out there. It's really appreciated.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your support, and we certainly appreciate the public's understanding and support. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's wake up Wyoming.